First, I would just like to say it's a privilege to be here, and I would like to thank ENERGIA for the opportunity to come. I think that a room filled with both practitioners, policymakers from government departments, etc., and researchers should be a very good idea to build and sharing experiences. So, as I was presented earlier, I'm a researcher at the Center for Development and Environment at the University of Oslo. And actually, energy is going to be one of the main focus areas, both of my center, but especially for the University of Oslo. We're going to make our own research center just on energy, which also pertains to studies from the South. Now, without excluding the importance of including men and gender mainstreaming and gender equality work, my research has been mainly focused on women, so not to offend anyone. I'm here today to talk about a research project I undertook in 2007 and published in 2008, pertaining to a solar lighting project in rural Afghanistan undertaken by a Norwegian NGO. So this was a project that was called a project with a difference from from the NGO called the Norwegian Church Aid, which is a quite large Norwegian NGO that has operations all over the world. It wanted to set up solar home systems in all the houses in the villages they picked, and also they would then have light in each room, one light outdoor and one solar lantern. This project was also based upon a cooperation with what is called the Barefoot College in India, and probably a lot of you have heard about the Barefoot College. If not, you should seek information about it. It's led by Bunker Roy, who's become quite a fashionable character. The Barefoot College has a very specific approach in their development projects. They firmly believe that the capacity and the knowledge to solve problems lies within the rural communities themselves. They only need to have their resources to do so. So, together, these two NGOs started this cooperation in 2005. So when I arrived, it had been ongoing for quite some time. So, Norwegian Church Aid started this project, as I said, in 2005. There were early indications of women's empowerment. Some of the persons that I will talk about later that were chosen for what they called barefoot solar engineers would participate in community meetings in their villages. And in Afghanistan, as you probably know, this was quite revolutionary at that time. So this caught my interest as political participation, and energy is one of my interest areas. This project was community-driven, and what does that really mean? I mean, it's a catchy phrase. In this case, with the barefoot approach, it was meant that the whole community would together actually decide if they wanted to go and participate in this project, and they would have this would be as in a meeting, and then they would select community members that would be trained as barefoot solar engineers. Now, Barefoot College usually trains only women, very often illiterate women who are rooted in their community, because that is what their philosophical view is about. Now, in Afghanistan, this was actually impossible. So the women were trained together with a male relative, a so-called maram, that would ensure their reputation and safety. Usually women would be trained with either a brother, a nephew, or a husband. This meant that they were actually sent to India for 6 months training. They were semi-literate. They would not be of the poorest and not the richest segment of their community. Now, they left behind themselves children, parents-in-law, everything, and went to India. Of course, this is both revolutionary, but also quite expensive, and a lot of the beneficiaries later said that they would rather be trained in Afghanistan. And today, the second generation is now trained by the same barefoot solar engineers in their, at least their province where they are, and that takes only 3 months. But it's a training period. Now, these barefoot solar engineers are actually then responsible for installing all the panels, all the equipment, and also maintaining them to reduce dependency on aid from outside. In Afghanistan, that would be impossible anyway. There's no market, there's nothing, you can't find these equipment, and these areas are extremely isolated, many of them. The community in this project has to pledge to pay the barefoot solar engineers a monthly salary, which is the financing model of this project for the employment of them. This salary, which is also one of the, what should I say, main challenges of such a project, was supposed to be equivalent of half the money spent early on kerosene. Now in Afghanistan they don't use kerosene for lanterns, they actually use diesel. And as I will come back to, not everybody in such a community would have diesel at all. But it was supposed to save money, and for most of the families it did, because then it reduced the energy costs. Equipment and training costs were covered by development assistance aid money. There's no microfinance in this project, and we're now talking about communities that are really the poorest of the poorest. As you know, Afghanistan is doing very poorly on all indicators. Also, in relation to employment opportunities, these barefoot solar engineers also undertook repairing equipment in other villages that had solar lighting equipment from other projects that more often broke down. For instance, there would be World Development Project, Afghan government project, etc. Now, this kind of employment opportunities would be for men only, as it would be more difficult for the women to go around on a regular basis. As we know, women are less mobile. So here's a solar workshop where they repair the equipment. In this village, unfortunately, there's only men trained. And the ideal in Afghanistan would be to train a woman and a man from each village. Of course, this was not possible. And at the time I was there, about a third of the barefoot solar engineers would be women. It could be that you had to make sure 2 clans were represented, which excluded the case of Maram, which had to be a relative. And other times women just didn't want to participate, and in one of the provinces it was impossible because of the presence of Taliban. It would mean danger for the women. So these are the provinces that Norwegian Church had worked in, and I visited Bamiyan province, and I also undertook a meeting with all the barefoot solar engineers in Afghanistan in Kabul for 2 days. So just shortly, this was the methodology that I used, mainly qualitative interviews with the shuras. Now in Afghanistan, village councils are called shuras, and after a project for the World Bank and the Afghan government, there is a requirement that all shuras have 50%, or at least not 50%, but at least have also representation, which has led to the establishment of both women shuras and men shuras that sometimes work together, but also sometimes work independently, depending on the context of each province and village. So here's an interview with a women's shura and a men's shura. Now, I will not go into the findings that much because this is not going to be a surprise for you. But of course, they said that they actually doubled their income, most of them, because they had much more time for weaving after dark. This was child labor, so you can of course discuss it, but in the means of necessity, I think that it provided a lot of opportunities for the families. Most of them also had more savings because they used less time and less money on diesel or kerosene. And very important in the context of women, they had less dependency on loans from other ethnic groups. Very often loans in Afghanistan, as they did not at that time have any microcredit finance possibilities or official bank loans, they would have loans from other groups that would be about the interest rate of 100. So you can imagine you never get out of that debt spiral. And these loans were almost exclusively used for food, so it was not a discussion if it was necessary or not. Very often it would mean that you would marry off a daughter and then just to get new loans, not to pay the loan. So in terms of human rights for women, of course, this had a lot of impact. Now they claimed that they didn't need these loans anymore, so. Less pollution indoors, well, not significantly, but they said there was less sore eyes, less headaches, etc. Because burning diesel in these lanterns were terrible, trust me. Better nutrition due to income and information from radio and TV, something we should not forget when we're talking about energy, because especially in countries like Afghanistan, the media is used extensively to give information about hygiene. Also, the time saved for the women allowed them to, for instance, participate in literacy courses that had gone on through all of Afghanistan. And there, for instance, they learn a lot about hygiene, and most of the villages now had started boiling their water. What is not mentioned here is also that light in the kitchen improved the cooking. And of course, raw meat, etc. also have detrimental effect on your health. So I'd just like to share a quote with you because I think that they're very illustrating. When you're sitting for long years at home and you could not see anybody, you do not have the confidence in yourself, and you do not know how to talk to other people because you have not seen people. When you go out and receive training and know about this and other things, you get confidence. You know how to talk and how to solve problems. This is an interview with a barefoot solar engineer called Soraya, who also, Soraya is a fictive name, just to mention it, who was the first woman to participate in a political meeting in her village. Of course, this has effect on education. It provides time in the evening to either leave or go to school. And especially for girls who are meant to participate more in chores at home, it is important. But I would like to note that this is an issue you have to reflect more upon, because girls' education is a very complex matter. For me, I found that actually the presence of women teachers was the most important, and also the proximity of the school. One of the villages was on a summer pasture, which meant that they would not send the girls to school because it would be a 3-hour walk. And in their perspective, the girls were too weak. What that really means is it could be safety, it could be other issues. One finding that I find quite interesting and is often neglected because it's not what you measure in evaluation reports when it comes to aid is that most of the informants expressed much more positive life. They had much more time together in the family, which improved their relationship with their husband, with their family generally, parents-in-law. They could sit in the evening and make plans for the future, which is very important if you want to come above that subsistence level. The marriage relationship actually had more privacy because they had lights in each room. And just having entertainment like TV and radio, which many of you know was very important for them. It also led to new mobility because the women extensively used the solar lanterns to go out and celebrate with other women in the evenings, for instance, and the children could be left alone because there was light in the houses and they would not be afraid. This mobility also facilitated women's networks, and it empowered them to such an extent that they would claim to be more part of the decision-making at home. And the men also confirmed this, saying that, for instance, women would put too much salt in the food, or etc. now, if they were not taken on board on decisions. So together they felt the strength of being fellow sisters. It also, as I said, led to educational opportunities both for girls and women. But most importantly, when we're talking about women's employment, I would like to stress the fact of changed perspectives that such interventions can do, and I would like to read another quote. I used to think women should stay at home. Now I think that our community is clear in their mind that women can do everything. Women are more independent now. When we went to India, there were women from many countries there. Then I thought, girls can do anything and serve the country. For me, this was a new thought. The girls were very young and good at learning. Then I saw that the other girls in Telonia, that's India, that women and men are equal in this, and that women have capabilities. This is a very interesting quote, because Shukrullah is actually a mullah, and he has spent 14 years in a madrasa in Pakistan, which makes him an educated man in Afghan standards. But, I mean, for most of us who read about the war on terror in Afghanistan, 14 years in madrasa, it makes you a quite conservative man. Actually, he sent his wife to relatives in a nearby town so that she could finish high school after having this training. So, changed perspectives. You see the woman there. I mean, does she look like the burqa-clad woman you see from media? I don't think so. Even in Norway, a woman that knows technology has more respect and status. So, yeah, it's not coincidental that we're talking about technology and women who know how to repair and install solar energy equipment. So communities now experience women's abilities in a new way, and the authoritative knowledge that women had, which would be on domestic chores, the household, etc., is now expanded to other areas. Of course, NGOs, when they come and sit with the community and lead on their priorities, it leads to new ideas, values, and experiences. But also the influx of media, seeing women journalists, women politicians in your own living room, was something that was mentioned frequently by the men. This transforms the discourse and negotiation over gender relations. I would like to mention, we are talking a lot about donor requirements. I mean, Norway is a country that is pushing gender maybe to the extreme to some extent. But when you go into a local community like Afghanistan, that is not what you're talking about. The idea behind choosing women as barefoot solar engineers lied in the sustainability of the project, since men often migrate for longer periods of time, and other men cannot go into houses where women are alone without risking the reputation of themselves and the women, which in Afghanistan could be quite dangerous. So women are more flexible to go into other people's homes at any time. So that was a sustainable element. Yes. There was also the establishment of new forms for participation. I mentioned the Women's Shura. Without it, it would have not had the same added value, because the barefoot solar engineers, women solar engineers, and the teachers in the society would always be members of these shuras. So they were seen as valuable assets, and they provided something to the community. They gave them respect and ability to go beyond their role as a mother or daughter or wife. And this was a new formalization of women's contribution that did not exist before. We all know that women has had informal power also in Afghanistan earlier. It's not, I mean, the idea that women were just excluded it's not reality. But the formal contribution of women's was a new thing. So challenges, the security situation, of course, I don't need even to mention it. The coordination of interventions is always important. But one important lesson here was that lack of payments actually entangled in social conflicts. Some people could not pay, usually widows or female-led households. This led to a lot of conflict of what was seen as Afghan justice, and actually Norwegian Church Aid had said that they should remove the pounds of those who didn't pay, so that was... And it also entangled into conflicts and political ambitions of partner organizations, so this is something to be very aware of. The poorest did not buy kerosene or diesel, so actually they were more disadvantaged. New appliances create new social divisions, such as TV, etc. It's also something to be aware of. And of course, solar electricity has a lot of limitations, especially concerning gender equality. There was no, for instance, improved cook stoves here, so the heating and the cooking would lead to the same indoor pollution as before. And one thing that I would like to stress is that women's new role actually also adds to the burden of their responsibility. We always talk about employment as something positive, and usually the opportunity to make an income is positive. But employment is not always liberatory. There were lots of new expectations from these women, and the list of what they could do, also at night with a solar lantern, was just never ending. They mentioned some cases because that has actually decreased. For instance, they could breastfeed at night without the commotion that it would be before, and tired men would be less angry, as they said. But they were also expected to go out at the night and wash clothes if they had not been able to do that during the day. This also led the men to be less angry. So in a way, you can see that these things can also help. Of course, they don't transform the cultural factors that lead to violence in the first place, but it leads to new expectations. And women's empowerment would not seen as legitimate for their own fulfilling. It would be for the society as a whole. And in this case, the women were still excluded from areas of reconciliation, which is very important that their perspectives are heard. And also would like to stress that the personal character of barefoot solar engineers is crucial to such projects' added value. As you probably all know, that if you select the wrong person, the whole success of the project actually lies on the shoulders of that person. Some of the women had a lot of interest in women's rights, etc., and would, do a lot of things that would add a value to this in terms of gender equalities, while others would be less interested in that. And also because of the added burden, a lot of the women who were chosen were quite old women, and they had done a lot for this project, but now they were tired and they just wanted to focus on being barefoot solar engineers, which of course excluded them from being in the shuras, etc. So, why is gender important in energy projects? Is gender a means to enhance such project success, or is actually energy a means to for gender equality? That's a question we could discuss, I think. It has a lot of potential impact. The space defining women's appropriate knowledge changes, allowing alternative discourses. Women and girls' education regain value. Women have new responsibilities in public life, such as political positions. Women's knowledge, experience, and priorities of energy solutions should be included to the benefit of the community. If women are not taken on board, such as here, it will be much more difficult to get their perspectives on what is important in energy, such as, for instance, improved cook stoves. So that was that.
Thank you.